Silence used to be the default. It was the background upon which everything else was painted. In the early hours before the world wakes, you can still catch a glimpse of what that was like. A time when the air didn't carry the weight of distant engines or the hum of electricity. It was a heavy, velvety presence. If you sat still enough, you could hear the house settling, a floorboard cooling, the wind finding a small gap in the window frame. These sounds didn't break the silence. They defined it. We didn't have to look for quiet back then. It was simply there waiting in the corners of every room. It was the natural state of things. A vast open space that lived between every word and every movement. Now we notice it only when it returns briefly, like a guest who has been away for a very long time. We realize then that we have grown used to the noise. We have forgotten how deep the stillness used to go. Before the cities grew tall, the world moved to a different rhythm. In the forests and the fields, silence wasn't the absence of sound, but the presence of nature's own breathing. The slow rustle of tall grass, the distant call of a bird that seemed to emphasize how much empty space lay between here and there. Early humans lived within this vastness. The nights were truly dark and the world was truly quiet. When a sound did occur, the snap of a twig or the rush of water, it had meaning. It was a singular event in a sea of stillness. There was a specific kind of peace in that environment, a sense of being small in a very large, quiet world. The sky felt higher because there was no hum to tether us to the ground. We carried that stillness inside us. It was part of how we saw the horizon. It was the baseline of our existence, a quiet that stretched out for miles in every direction, reaching us all the way to the stars. Inside the home, silence used to have a seat at the table. There were hours in the afternoon when the chores were done and the house fell into a deep, midday slumber. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, a steady rhythmic pulse that marked the passage of time without rushing it. In those moments, the rooms seemed to breathe. The light would move across the wallpaper inch by inch, and the only company you had was the sound of your own breathing. It was a shared silence. Two people could sit in the same room for an hour, reading or staring out the window, without feeling the need to fill the gap with speech. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was a comfort. It was a way of being together without demands. The walls held the stillness. The furniture seemed rooted in it. It was a private, protected world where thoughts could drift like smoke, unhurried and uninterrupted. Gradually, the background began to change. It started with small things: the hum of a refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant rumble of a train. These were the first notes of a new kind of atmosphere. Soon the wires began to sing. Electricity brought a constant, low-frequency vibration into our living spaces. It was a sound we eventually stopped hearing, but it was always there. A thin veil between us and the true quiet. The streets outside grew restless. The sound of tires on pavement became a continuous stream, like a river that never stops flowing. The world was waking up, and it was bringing a chorus of machinery with it. The silence didn't vanish all at once. It was chipped away piece by piece. The gaps between sounds became smaller. The pauses became shorter. We began to live in a world that was always, on some level, humming. We found ways to fill the remaining spaces. Music became something that followed us from room to room, the radio, then the television, and eventually the devices in our pockets. We began to carry our own environments with us, a portable landscape of melody and voice. It became a habit to turn something on the moment we walked through the door. The sound of a stranger talking on a screen became a substitute for the stillness of an empty house. We started to fill the gaps in our conversations with digital pings and notifications. The quiet moments while waiting for a bus or walking down a street were replaced by the sounds of 1,000 other places. We were never truly alone with our thoughts anymore. There was always a melody to guide our moods, a voice to keep us company. The silence was no longer a resource. It was a void that we felt an urge to decorate. There's a difference between quiet and silence. Quiet is when the noise is low, but silence is when the noise is truly gone. As the world became louder, we began to find silence uncomfortable. When the power goes out, or when we find ourselves in a place far from the city, the sudden lack of sound can feel heavy. It can feel like a pressure against the ears. We have become so accustomed to the constant texture of sound that its absence feels like a missing limb. We feel exposed. Without the background hum, we are forced to hear the internal noises, the heartbeat, the rush of blood, the sound of a mind that doesn't know how to stop. We have moved away from the stillness, and now, when we encounter it, it feels foreign. It feels like a language we used to speak, but have since forgotten. We stand in the middle of a quiet room and wait for something to happen, not realizing that the silence is what is happening. What happens to the thoughts that only come in the quiet? There are certain reflections that require a long, uninterrupted stretch of time. Thoughts that are shy, that hide away when there is music or chatter or the hum of the city. When silence disappeared, those thoughts lost their habitat. They became harder to find. We began to think in shorter bursts, punctuated by the rhythm of the world around us. We replaced reflection with reaction. Instead of sinking into a thought, we skip across the surface of many. The depth that silence provided, the ability to go down deep into the self, has been replaced by a horizontal movement, a constant stream of next. Yet the need for that depth remains. We still look for it, even if we don't know that's what we're doing. We look for it in the late hours or in the moments just before sleep, when the world finally retreats and leaves us alone with ourselves. Even our sleep has changed. Once, The night was a vast ocean of nothingness. Now, it is filled with the standby lights of our electronics, tiny red and green eyes watching us from the dark, and the sound remains. The city hums through the walls, the fan spins. The white noise machine creates a digital version of the wind to mask the sounds of the street. We use noise to fight noise, creating a layer of static to protect our rest. We are cocooned in a manufactured atmosphere. We no longer sleep in the silence of the earth. We sleep in the hum of the grid. In the morning, the transition is seamless. We move from the sounds of the night into the sounds of the day, without ever passing through a moment of true stillness. The cycle is continuous. The loop never breaks. The silence is always just out of reach, tucked away in a past we can't quite remember. We see the loss of silence in the way we move through the world. Walk through a park, and you will see people with wires in their ears. They are physically in the grass, under the trees, but they are listening to a city 3,000 miles away or a beat that was recorded in a studio. The environment is filtered. We choose what we hear, which means we never have to hear the world as it is. We never have to hear the nothing. But there is a price for this curation. When we filter out the silence, we also filter out the accidental, the small, quiet surprises of the everyday, the sound of a distant neighbor's piano, or the specific way the wind moves through a particular type of tree. We've created a world where we are always at the center of our own soundscape. The external world has become a silent film, and we are the ones providing the soundtrack. Perhaps silence hasn't disappeared. Perhaps it has just moved. It has become a luxury, something you have to travel to find. People pay for retreats where talking is forbidden, seeking out the very thing their ancestors had for free every single day. We treat silence like a medicine now, a way to detox from the digital world. We go to the mountains or the desert to hear ourselves think, as if our thoughts are only audible when the rest of the world is muted. But even there, it feels different. We are aware of the silence. We are conscious of it. We take photos of the stillness and share them, bringing the noise of the network into the very heart of the quiet. It is no longer a natural state. It is a destination, a place we visit before returning to the roar of the life we have built. What are we afraid of finding in the quiet? There is a restlessness that comes when the music stops, a feeling that we should be doing something, or that we are missing out on something important happening elsewhere. Silence forces us to face the present moment without any decorations. It strips away the distractions and leaves us with the raw reality of being alive. For some, that is a beautiful thing. For others, it is a source of anxiety. In the silence, the ego has nothing to feed on. There are no likes, no comments, no streams of information to validate our existence. There is just the breath, the pulse, the slow passage of time. We have built a civilization that is terrified of being bored. But boredom is often just the doorway to a deeper kind of attention. When we fill every gap, we never get to see what lies on the other side of that door. The future of silence is uncertain. As we move deeper into a world of constant connectivity, the spaces for stillness continue to shrink. Our cities are getting louder. Our devices are getting smarter. The hum is becoming more complex. But maybe silence doesn't need to be a place. Maybe it's a way of listening. We can find a kind of internal silence, even in the middle of the noise. A way of letting the sounds pass through us without holding on to them. A way of being still while the world moves. We don't know what we've lost, because you can't measure something that isn't there. We only know that something feels different, that the air feels thinner, that the nights feel shorter. If you listen closely right now beneath the sound of this voice, beneath the hum of your room, there is a layer of stillness that hasn't changed. It is still there, waiting. It doesn't need us to find it. It just is.